good morning, or whatever time it is when you're watching this. And thank you for joining me. If this is your first time, I'm Norma Fergusson and I'm the Vicar of the Shrivenham and Ashbury Benefice. If you'd like to know more about us, then please look on our website or our Facebook page. The Gospel reading for today's communion service comes from Matthew chapter 10, verses 24 to 39. To save you looking it up, it's this. A disciple is not above the teacher, nor a slave above the master. It is enough for the disciple to be like the teacher, and the slave like the master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebul, how much more will they malign those of his household? So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing secret that will not become known. What I say to you in the dark, tell in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops. Do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground unperceived by your Father. And even the hairs on your head are all counted. So do not be afraid. You are of more value than many sparrows. Everyone, therefore, who acknowledges me before others, I also will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before others, I will also deny before my Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And one's foes will be members of one's own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. And if you're wondering what on earth this has to do with Father's Day, well, me too. And the answer is that unlike Mothering Sunday, the Church of England does not recognise Father's Day, which means there are no special readings or prayers, and we're left with whatever the lectionary has ordained for the second Sunday after Trinity. But having thought about it for a while, I don't think it's completely inappropriate. However, before I start down that road, it is Father's Day, and I know for some it can be bittersweet for all sorts of reasons. Sadly, not all fathers are wonderful, or can be with us to celebrate, even if they are, particularly this year. But the biblical image of God as Father reflects the best of fatherhood. God as the creator of the world, the giver of wisdom and law, the protector of his children, and above all, through Jesus, we have learned to see God as Abba, someone with whom we can always have a loving, trusting relationship. St. Paul puts it beautifully in his letter to the Galatians. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent his Son, born of woman, born under the law, in order to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as children. And because you are children, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a child. And if a child, then also an heir through God. But on to the reading. It's not an easy one on first hearing, and the fact that it's just a group of instructions strung together without much by way of explanation doesn't help us. But there is a common thread, and that is discipleship. Jesus is talking about what it really means to be a disciple. The word disciple means learner, so the first paragraph is about learning as much as we can from our teacher. But it also points out that if we become too closely identified with a teacher who challenges the authorities, we may suffer for that. The first disciples would come to know this only too well. And so do we, if we think about it. Living the Christian life we learn about in the Gospels is not always easy or popular. And without stretching the point too much, I hope, our fathers can be among our first and best teachers. In the second passage, we have a wonderful image of a God who cares. A sparrow was almost worthless in human terms. Some translations have farthing instead of penny. So 8 sparrows for 1 old penny, and I think 16 for a new penny. No thing, no one, however small, is worthless in God's eyes, and we must never forget that. And then we come to the difficult bit. Don't we speak of Jesus as the Prince of Peace? Doesn't the image of disunity and dysfunction go against all our ideals of family life? Well, the sad and difficult truth is that not everyone will be happy if we choose to become disciples, or with the way of life which follows from that. By and large, I think we expect our families to love and support us, even if we do make life choices they don't expect or don't totally agree with. But not all families can or will. At least in the UK, even if the result is personal sadness or estrangement, it's generally no more than that. Elsewhere in the world, there is a real risk of imprisonment or physical harm, just as there was for those first disciples. One report I saw on the BBC last year estimated the number of persecutions of Christians as being as high as 1 in 3. And that's a really sobering thought. Jesus is never dishonest about the cost of discipleship. If you're not ready to make the sacrifices, he says, don't start. But once you do, whatever challenges you face as you play your part in bringing about God's kingdom, that time when families will flourish and there will be real peace, God will be with you always. You will not be abandoned, and your struggles will not be in vain. In the words of Now Thank We All Our God, God's kingdom was, is now, and shall be evermore. And that's why the heart of this passage is the repetition of have no fear, do not fear, do not be afraid. Those are the words to cling to this morning, whatever we are doing, whatever we are faced with, and particularly because a world emerging from lockdown can seem like a really scary place. And that's before we even start to think about the other things like health and finance and our families and the stuff that keeps us awake at night. As children, maybe even as adults, we can run to a human father for comfort and reassurance when life is hard. As children of God, with his Spirit in our hearts, we know that God comes to us. God is with us. And the more we learn about him, the deeper our discipleship becomes, the less we will fear, because we will always be aware of his presence with us. And no power in heaven or on earth is greater than his. So, in the words of the Celtic blessing, words which for me epitomize the loving, protective, and fatherly nature of God. Until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Amen.